Please welcome the director, Ido Mizrahy, journalist Jeff Gray, and I want to bring to stage Patrolman P himself, Bill Phillips. Bill, I don't know when the first time you had a chance to see this movie was, but can you elaborate on what it's like for you to watch this film?
Well, I was captivated. I'm looking at, wow, this guy's up there got some story. We've been working on this for a long, long time, and I hadn't seen the updated clips we had as we went along. But I look at this, and I just can say to these two guys, boy, you did one hell of a job. This whole project was a complicated thing. I mean, it's over years and years of gathering information and doing research and so forth. And it's like taking a handful of sand and throw it out into the audience and try to pick up the pieces. That's how many things were involved in getting this thing together. And to get it where it told a story in such an accurate, how would I say, compelling manner. I mean, I'm looking at this thing and I'm in it. I'm saying, boy, these guys did some job on this thing. This is like, I'm overwhelmed at the work that they did. Everybody that was in this project was overwhelming to me to have a chance to bring this story out to everybody. I'm flabbergasted at this moment.
Ido, can you talk about what was the biggest challenges of turning this into a film?
Definitely. I think Errol Morris was here a couple days ago, and he was talking about going into a story, having certain expectations, trying to. The opening movie was the Donald Rumsfeld picture, and like trying to go into an investigation, whether you're investigating a character or a story, trying to get to something new that you're going to show in your film. Inevitably, that's the idea. That's why Jeff is an investigative reporter. I mean, that's why I try to tell a good story. Is you try to show something new, and sometimes you don't actually get to anything that could break a case or could really shed enough light to change it in the physical world. And what we found here, and why it was a challenge, but it actually became more interesting, is that the sort of secondary story, which is how Bill and his participation in the Knapp Commission hearings was still something so potent. I mean, you should have read some of the blogs, like all these cop blogs. And what young cops who probably hadn't been born at the time were saying when Bill was coming out of prison, there was this very intense hatred, and to a man who broke that code, and to me that became the story within the story, and finding it in cops today, who I think were still affected by it, and I think Bill knows, could sense that too. But what was interesting also is that, Bob and Kim are actually here. I should mention, they're right here. They're sitting right in the front, and their daughter Allie, and we did lose touch with them for a while, but then they kind of circled back to us, and actually, have become friends with Bill again. And so there is, and I think in a lot of ways, I think for former cops, there's this sort of camaraderie that never dies. It's really interesting, I think.
The question was, does anyone on the stage have a guess as to who might have committed that murder?
Oh. You want to talk about it? Okay, just one main thing. This trial was based on solely the description of Charles Gonzalez. There's no fingerprints, of course there was no DNA, there's no physical evidence, there's nothing to connect me with the crime except the testimony of Charles Gonzalez, who was a graduate of the old insane asylum out there, and they call Creedmoor. He spent most of his time there, a good part of his life. Anyway, the theory that I have is that this was a loan shark, because Jimmy Smith was beat up, at least, to my knowledge, at least 4 times for owing money to the loan sharks, all right? And a loan shark that's the last resort. They don't want to kill their source. But if you become I understand that he owed the loan sharks $40,000. And I guess he wasn't paying on time. He continually moved his operation to stay ahead of the loan sharks. And then, of course, they're giving the money, they want to get paid. But the only theory is that he owed the money. He didn't want to pay it, and the loan shark finally said, okay, this is the end of it. He shot Jimmy Smith, and he shot the 2 witnesses. He killed Sharon Stango, and of course he shot Charles Gonzalez, which was the entire case that they had against me. the identification of me being a 5'8" pockmarked Italian. Do I look like a 5'8" pockmarked Italian? A lot of people in the first trial didn't think so, but the second trial was a lot different. There was evidence brought into the second trial where I think of Oliver North. You remember Oliver North? He testified with that Iran-Contra thing, and they gave him immunity, okay? After they gave him immunity, they indicted him, convicted him on the immunized testimony, all right? Finally, he got a good lawyer, a guy named Brendan Behan, and he got exonerated. Meanwhile, poor Oliver North lost his pension. He was going to prison. He lost everything, and he got exonerated. I have the same aspect in my case. When I was before I worked with the Nat Commission, Mike Armstrong, have you seen the guy with the patch on his eye? He's okay. He says, we want to know all the big scores you made. So I sat down and we made this tape. And at the tape, there was a man named Tom Sweeney. He was an FBI agent. Mike Armstrong, one of his associates, and me. And the tape was like, oh, maybe an hour and a half, whatever. All the things I did. And during the course of the tape, when me, took money from somebody, like say a guy in organized crime, we would catch him bookmaking or whatever and say, okay, you give us $1,500 or $1,000, and you go on the pad then. That means that we have a systematic payoff every month that you're going to pay rent. Well, we have the badge, we have the city. So anyway, in my rendition of what I was doing, I had met Jimmy Smith in 1965, I guess it was, whenever, and we had scored him for a couple $1,000, and we were supposed to put him on a pad, right? So when I'm making the rendition, I'm saying, yeah, we scored Jimmy Smith and put him on a pad. Okay, now they go through the tape, and I said, oh, wait a second. Down further in the tape, I said, we scored Jimmy, we never put him on a pad because he didn't have any more money, whatever. He was a deadbeat, so we write him off. You're not going to waste your time going back trying to get money out of a rock. So during a trial, I'm on the stand for like 3 or 4 days, and they say to me, you ever put Jimmy Smith on a pad? No, I never put him on a pad. Next day, you ever put Jimmy Smith on a pad? No, I never put him on a pad. Okay, Sam, play it again. They take the tape that I had under the grant of immunity and played it where the first part says, yeah, we scored Jimmy Smith and put him on a pad. I say, wow, where's the rest of the tape? They didn't play the rest of the tape. They just left it that way. And I was now a liar in front of the jury on evidence that was never allowed to be admitted, and they admitted it. We went all the way up to the courts with all the appeals, never had any luck with that. But that's just the one instance. And again, the only possible motive for this crime is a loan shark. He was involved with the loan sharks. He was beat up by loan sharks. So when Justy had the case, he got the case. I think Jimmy was killed in 1968, and they make a report. They made, since 1968, until they put me as a witness, they put in 2 reports. There was no investigation on this case whatsoever. My theory, Justy found out who did it, went, knocked on the door, said, listen, we got a case over here on the east side of one of your guys knocked off somebody. Oh, come on in, John, we got a couple of $1,000 for you. And he paid him off. How could you have a double homicide on the east side of New York in 1968 and you put in 2 supplemental reports? That's unheard of, absolutely unheard of. A squad commander, if you had a homicide case and you put in 2 reports, you're back in uniform. That shows you did no actually work on the whole thing. But anyway, the question is...
Just to your question, by the way, was there another... I think there was a moment where F. Lee Bailey was going to pull some kind of a Perry Mason thing and say, we have the real guy, right? They almost thought they had the real guy. And then they kind of
There was a question, they had somebody who fit the description, and they took a photograph of the guy and everything else, and the investigator didn't sign the photograph because it was a guy who fit the description of this 5'8" pockmarked Italian. But anyway, that went up in smoke. But anyway, loan shark, loan shark, loan shark.